how do you fancy this? A 4-day working week and only 6 hours a day.
I'm in.
24 hours, and that's your lot until next Monday. That's the plan for the lucky people of Finland after the Scandinavian country's new 34-year-old Prime Minister, Sanna Marin, called for people to be able to spend more time with their families, even if they don't like them. As things stand in Finland, the average worker puts in 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, just like here. But Ms. Marin believes that shorter hours will add up to more productivity and happier employees. In neighbouring Sweden, the 6-hour working day trialled in 2015 was hailed as a stunning success. And in Japan, as you mentioned earlier, Matthew, when Microsoft there introduced a 3-day weekend, productivity soared by an astonishing 40%. So isn't it about...
I just don't get it.
Well, yeah.
I mean, 40% is huge.
I know. But perhaps that's the Japanese, I don't know. But my question would be, isn't it about time Britain, where we work among the longest hours in the world, got with the programme? Joining us now is the spokesman for the New Economics Foundation. And part of their organisation's efforts is to get us a 4-day week
campaign, isn't it?
Aidan Harper. Hello, Aidan.
Hi.
Afternoon. Before we get to Finland, why can't we get to grips with getting a 4-day week or a 3-day week or something?
It was suggested everybody laughed, didn't they? John McDonnell suggested everybody laughed.
I mean, it's a great question, and I guess we can first look at the history of working time and see that we have significantly reduced our working time over the last 100 years or so. You know, we used to have a 6-day week. We used to work, above 60, 70, 80 hours a week.
No holidays.
And exactly, and all these things over like trade union campaigns, legislation.
Because people here might listen and think it's a good idea and go back to the dark days.
Well, I mean, but those dark days were, not only were they awful for us, they also didn't work economically. And today we still have, we are still one of the most overworked economies in Europe, and it's making us ill, and it makes our economy run particularly badly. So 1 in 4 of all 6 days lost last year in the UK was a direct result of overwork. It doesn't work for us, it doesn't work for our well-being, our mental health, and it certainly doesn't work for our economy. If we look at other economies across Europe, we can see that there's a direct correlation with economies and societies who work fewer hours who are also more productive.
But productivity, takes many forms. So when Labour proposed a 4-day week in their manifesto, it was pointed out that the NHS simply could not function if everyone just did a 4-day week there. So while it may be good for
one report which was widely discredited after, and that the information that they took from that did not take into account any of the added benefits of reduced working time, including improvements to mental health, reduced turnover. So that report from the CPS was widely discredited, and actually it was found that introducing a 4-day week over a period of time into institutions like the NHS would actually have an incredibly low cost.
Just so I'm clear, you're making very clear the impact on mental health and physical health, actually, that can come from overwork. Is that the primary concern? Is that the primary issue you're trying to address? Because that kind of makes sense to me. I guess it's very easy you can think of it the other way and think, well, how many billionaires became billionaires doing 4-day weeks? Most of the people I know that have become super rich work ludicrously long hours. In fact, they don't have a life. All they do is work. And it's very rare, I suppose, unless you're sort of Donald Trump figure gets given £1 billion or $1 billion to get going. Otherwise, you're going to work your way through it. So we've got clear evidence that for some, working ludicrously hard generates huge incomes and huge benefits in life, but for many others, it comes with a very high cost to health.
I mean, yeah, that's very true, and there are a fair few issues that to kind of address with this. And one, for example, is thinking not just about, we're not all farm labourers going into work and, the time we put in is what we get out of it. We live in a very different world of work, which involves a hell of a lot of technology. And so there's a whole conversation here about automation and how we deal with new forms of technology in our workplace, which make us more productive. But at the moment, we're not really automating in the UK as we should. And then when we do automate, we're not really thinking about the impact on the workforce. And one of the central arguments towards around moving to a shorter working week is that as we replace labour with technology, with machines or with AI, whatever it is, we should think about sharing the benefits of increased productivity as a result of this new technology in the form of a shorter working week.
Aidan, do you have any evidence as to how many people actually want a 4-day week? Because a lot of people enjoy their work and they like doing a 5-day week.
Yeah, good point.
So YouGov did a poll last year across Europe and found that in the UK, Britons were the most enthusiastic in all of Europe to move towards a 4-day week. I think something like 63% of people would like to move towards a 4-day week.
47% don't then?
No. So only 23% said that they actually didn't.
That's quite significant.
That's significant. But in terms of attitudes towards general changes and policy changes, that's a significant amount of people. Like in relation to who supports the NHS, who supports this, that, the other, and this is improving over time as people campaign on it, as we see successes, as we look at other countries who are doing it. So it's very much something which more and more people in this country are recognising as an ambition for the economy.
I can see why, Aidan, people, maybe a quarter of people, don't feel they want to reduce their working life. And if it's anything like the people I meet who don't relish the idea of retiring, it's because, I would suggest, they've spent their whole life doing nothing but work, and the thoughts, because they've never had any time to develop any other interests, because they're always at work, they're terrified that if work is taken away from them, they will have nothing to do in their lives. And one of the wonderful things, I think, of having a longer weekend or a shorter working week is you will have more time. I mean, David Cameron, I can remember years ago, was suggesting for community efforts to get more involved in our communities, that you will almost be forced to use your time in a more productive manner for you rather than for a company, and that in turn might make the idea of working less frightening.
Yeah, I mean, that's very true, and it's really important if we think about people who do retire. There's often this kind of cliff edge effect where people retire and they hit a big depression because a lot of, as you're saying, their entire lives have been formed around work, or their friendships, relationships, their day-to-day habits revolve around work, because during their working lives they have not had the time to cultivate other things that mean a lot to them outside of that workplace. And it's really important to have a thriving community, to have a thriving and functioning democracy, that we have the time to be able to engage in those institutions with our families, with our friends, with our local government, with campaigns, with activities, with our communities. This takes time, and we should see time as a resource which we need to build upon and build into our lives and our working lives and our society.
It's really interesting because your words are chiming with one of the former dragons from Dragon's Den, a billionaire or near billionaire, who told me that he's encouraging his kids, as he put it, not to follow in his footsteps because he didn't feel the opportunities to make a fortune are there as they were. And instead, he said that he was mindful of the fact that future generations are likely to have much more free time on their hands because of all the things you mentioned, Aidan, including more automation, and that he felt that it was much more important for his children to find ways to entertain themselves, to find good enjoyment from life. So he was advocating learning musical instruments, finding joy in painting pictures, doing anything at all that gives your life meaning rather than work. But then, Aidan, the real crunch question for me is, yes, I love the idea of working shorter hours, especially now I've got a baby. I'd love to be there and spending more time looking after her. But can I afford it? Will I really be able to pocket the same money that I might do now for working a whole day less?
So the campaign, which the Economic Foundation supports, the 4-day week campaign, and the case that we've put forward is that a reduction in work time should happen without a reduction in pay. Pay should remain the same, and that's not, that might sound a bit mad and like, how the hell are we going to afford that? But that is exactly what happens when we moved from a 6 to a 5-day week. It's what happened when we reduced time over the last 100, 200 years. Is salaries not only maintained the same, but they went up. And if we look at other countries in Europe, the countries with low working hours actually have higher salaries than we do. Or you've mentioned Finland, Sweden, Denmark, the Netherlands, Germany. These are countries which pay very well.
But Aidan, I mean, all those sort of money-grabbing business executives, the Gordon Gekko figures that are out there, they must see this data as well. So if they know they can make more money by getting us to work fewer hours, why don't they do it?
I think increasingly they are. So the shorter working week, the 4-day week, is something which companies are beginning to experiment with a hell of a lot. And it does take a kind of like a counterintuitive stance to be like, oh, if you work less, actually you get healthier, more productive employees who are more likely to stay in the organisation. You might be able to recruit better, but actually that takes a kind of a cultural shift. And we need to have these conversations like we are now on the radio. We need to have conversations in our workplaces, in our trade unions. We need to speak to employers and people in society and actually get, as a point of view of political education, think about how we spend our time inside and outside of work.